Here's Johnny.
You're gonna need a big approach.
So serious.
I am Iron Man.
This is a tasty burger.
Welcome to the In Session Film Podcast.
Welcome to this podcast review for May 20th, 2025. I am Brendan Cassidy, and my usual co-host, JD Duran, is not able to join me today, but thankfully, it is not because he suffered some extravagant Final Destination-like death sequence. Thank God for that. It's not the case there. He was simply unable to be here tonight, but I think it worked out perfectly, if I'm being honest, as I get to be joined by one of our dearest members of the In Session Film family. It's been a while since we've had him on the show here, and thankfully it's someone that also has an interest in the Final Destination franchise, as I'm sure we'll talk about. Joey Gentile. Joey, thanks for joining me again, man.
Brandon, thank you so much for having me. JD, I will see you in the afterlife. And man, it's great. It's great to be back. It's been so long. Yeah. Just in general with In Session, between the upcoming finally getting, finished Justin Henry piece on that interview I did with him, which is, dude, I'm so excited for people to he really sat down with me and just let me have one of those really good exclusives with him. So I'm excited for that. But
that's amazing
to do that and to be working on that and then plus this, I'm just it's like a little reunion. It's a homecoming for me.
It really is. Yeah, we were talking about this offline, trying to figure out the last time we spoke in podcast form, at least in some type of review setting of sorts. And I think the last time was Mortal Kombat back in 2021. That was a fun conversation, if I can say so myself. Although, funny enough, a movie I think I've completely forgotten by this point.
And if you think about it, there's a scene that features Mortal Kombat in this movie, so
That's
it's
true.
It's a full circle moment.
It is a full circle, man. This worked out perfectly. I didn't even think about that, man. Thank God you're here. Thank God you're here. And as you were talking about, you've been contributing to In Session Film for, I don't even know how long at this point. I think I've lost count at how many years it's been. But it's all been great work with, excellent pieces with Chasing the Gold. You've done great interviews, as you were alluding to there too. I think your claim to fame, though, is your excellent piece on Mamma Mia, Here We Go Again.
Oh, what a travesty of a sequel. So for those who don't know, in general, the way I wasn't ever asked to be a part of the In Session family. I just kind of went to JD one day and was like, I've got this idea for a review about the Deer Hunter. And he's like, just send me what you got. And all of a sudden he's like, I'm going to post it. And then all of a sudden I just kept getting assignments.
Yeah.
But the one that he's like, write whatever you want to write about. I'm like, all right, I have an issue, and there's this movie called Mamma Mia, Here We Go Again. That is the biggest piece of trash sequel I've ever seen in my life. It's so lazy. You got zombie Cher in that thing. It's such a lazy piece of crap. And the fact that they're like, oh, we're going to do a third one. I'm like, no, stop that. Stop. But yeah, that was a funny one.
It is still one of my favorite pieces of content that we've posted on the website. There's just so much passion. That's what makes you so great, Joey. I love the passion and your unfiltered passion more specifically, which is why I'm really looking forward to this conversation on Final Destination Bloodlines, which is a film that's been reaching franchise highs, both critically and monetarily. I'm sure we'll talk about that further. I should also note up front that offline, I was told that Joey has, quote, things to say, exclamation point, unquote, as it pertains to this movie. So I just want to lay those cards out there as a great prelude as to what we're about to get into. Before we do, though, let's maybe talk about the franchise itself, a little bit about Final Destination in general. What are your thoughts on the series? Do you have a particular history with it? Just overall, your feelings about it.
Yeah, so as a millennial, I'm 33 years old, and I think we're pretty close in age, if I'm not mistaken.
I'm 35. Yeah.
Yeah. So you got 2 years on me there, but 25 years ago, this franchise has been going 25 years strong. It's been dormant for about 14 years now. I was actually, I think it was the summer I moved out to LA that the fifth one came out. But that's just recollecting that. No, I fell in love with this movie with part 3, actually.
Okay.
My birthday's in February, and I remember the third one came out in February of '06. I was in the 8th
Okay.
grade.
Okay.
And I had to sneak into the AMC that was near my house at that time. So like I think I bought a ticket for like, I don't know, the fog wouldn't have been out at that time. But whatever PG-13 movie was out.
Okay.
And I
Okay.
snuck in, and you know what's crazy, dude? I fell in love with that movie so much. I actually started tanning because of that movie.
So the movie didn't scare you away from tanning beds. It actually brought you in.
How psychotic, right? But yeah, I fell in love with the third one. Then I remember I went back to Blockbuster. There was one at the corner of my street where I grew up at in Cleveland. And then I rented 1 and 2. And I always found 1 to be like, okay, it's cool. It's setting it up, blah, blah, blah. I always found 2 to be so campy and hokey. 3, I just had a blast with. Then there's 4, which is a movie.
Does not exist. It's the bastard child. It doesn't even have the numerical designator for it.
Right. And you know what I love, though, is that even the producers know it's bad. There was a recent interview that came out with Craig Perry, who he's even like, yeah, it sucked. It was terrible. So like, you even know when the producers are like, this is bad, it's bad.
Yeah.
And then 5 was so fantastic, and it had such a great twist that like, I'm genuinely surprised this series lay dormant for so long. But I've enjoyed most of it. Yeah.
It has a really fun concept. I think it's a nice twist on the slasher genre. It also worked out nicely that JD's not here because he's admittedly not the biggest fan of this franchise. So I think it works out nicely to talk to you about this one. But I've overall enjoyed these movies as well, primarily because of its gimmick. But like you, it sounds like we gravitate towards similar things that this franchise has to offer when it's able to bridge that gap between fascination and hokiness. I think it is at its strongest. Admittedly, I think my 3 favorites in the franchise are still the first 3. So maybe call me a bit of a traditionalist, I guess.
Yeah.
But it was the third one that made me really kind of appreciate its dark sense of humor. There's a meanness to this franchise. And as I've gotten older, I've kind of gravitated towards movies that embrace nihilism, which is a weird thing to say. But I really appreciate when this franchise gets mean and nasty. And those early films, especially 2 and 3, I'm with you. I think those are probably the meanest ones of all of them. And that makes them so rewatchable for me.
Yeah. I remember when 3 came out because do you remember the era of the 2000s when a horror movie would come out and there was like the theatrical release and then the unrated version? And there was
yeah.
There was always like 1 to 2 to 3 minutes and you really couldn't tell the difference, but you knew you were getting something else.
Yeah.
3's DVD release was fascinating because it was like a choose your own adventure option where you could also watch it and choose what characters did on a separate disc, and it gave you different.
Gosh, I remember that. Oh my goodness.
So for like an example, there was Ashlyn in the tanning bed scene, and there's Ashlyn played by Yankee Crystal Lowe. She gets out of the tanning bed, and she's the brunette for anyone who needs a visual. And then Shalane Simmons, who plays Ashley, gets stuck still into the tanning bed, and like the piece of wood that like seals them in hits Yankee Crystal Lowe, again Ashlyn, in the head, knocks her out for a little bit. So then she wakes up, gets it out, goes to grab Ashley out of the bed, and they both get electrocuted. So like there were ways to change the deaths even. It was fascinating.
That's so cool. I mean, the outcome seems to still be the same. It's just the way those outcomes were orchestrated. It's almost like you got to play the role of death in that choose your own adventure. That's really clever DVD marketing. I miss those days.
Yeah. And I mean, we also grew up with the Goosebumps series, and there were the Choose Your Own Goosebump Adventure books. So it was like to finally get that in, movie form is really cool. And I feel like there was something recently that tried to do that and it didn't work, but maybe I'm making that up. But I don't
know. I think you're right. But if anything, maybe it wasn't well marketed because it was probably a failed experiment and they just didn't have faith in it. I love how you brought up Goosebumps there for just a moment, because in a way, Final Destination 3 is probably the most Goosebumps-like out of all of these movies. In a way, it's almost like the R-rated version of Goosebumps, but it has a similar kind of tonality to it. And I tried thinking about what my ranking of the Final Destination franchise would be, and I didn't quite put 3 at the top, but the more we talk about it here, I think it is actually my favorite of the 3, or of the 5 or the 6, I guess at this point now. I'll just openly say that. And I think it's because it does the best job maybe balancing or straddling that line between the horror tropes of this franchise while kind of alluding to the more action tropes of the franchise as well. It's the perfect middle ground in many ways, but that movie is that movie's so much fun if you ask me.
Yeah, and then, of course, to this day, I mean, when I'm driving and there's a pickup truck, a cargo truck filled with wood.
Still the
with
best
logs.
opening of any of these movies, I think.
Yes, absolutely, still the best one. And we'll get into it. And I'm not going to go too much into it because we'll get there. But like, there's a hokiness with the CGI on Final Destination 4 level of this one for me that is like my biggest issue. And then I went back and rewatched the opening to 2 and 3, and it's like even 5 used a green screen for most of that, but you can't really tell unless it's the 3D moments.
It's rendered pretty nicely in that.
Right. And that was, again, 14 years ago. So when you look at like Final Destination 2, and you realize, oh, they actually used real logs. The only thing that they got in on the computer generated graphics were like the bouncing of the logs, and but you would never be able to tell. And it's like, if we could do that 20 some odd years ago, why? And again, we'll get into it, but like,
we'll get it. Yeah, I think that's a nice transition into Final Destination Bloodlines, and I really look forward to this conversation. Let's lay the groundwork here. The film is directed by Zach Lipovsky and Adam B. Stein, who apparently staged their own death during their Zoom pitch for this movie, and that's how they got the gig. I think that's a great story nonetheless, how the movie turned out. The film was also written by Laurie Evans Taylor and Guy Busick, and I want to call them out, especially the latter, because he actually worked with Radio Silence on movies like Ready or Not and Screams 5 and 6. I think that's very noteworthy. The film also gives a story and a producer credit to John Watts of Spider-Man No Way Home fame. And I didn't know going into this movie that he was actually very integral in bringing this movie to life, apparently. I thought that was kind of interesting. I just didn't know that. But as far as the rest of the film also stars a slew of relative unknowns. They include Caitlin Santawana, Teo Briones, Richard Harmon, Owen Patrick Joyner, Anna Lore, Raya Kilstead, Brett Basinger, Gabriel Rose. But of course, we have to shout out the late, great Tony Todd in his final film appearance before his passing late last year. And I'm sure we'll have more to say about his return as William John Bloodworth. Probably the best name, honestly, for a franchise like this.
Yeah.
Now, I'm sure all of you listening, you already know what this movie is. But just in case, the film is about a college student who is plagued by a reoccurring violent nightmare and then returns home to find the one person who can break death's cycle and save her family from a terrible fate that awaits them all. Very much a Final Destination plotline there. All right, Joey, let's get into it. You have thoughts. What did you think about Final Destination Bloodlines?
Yeah. So first of all, I need to shout out Rich D'Elia, who's the casting director of this movie, because one of the coolest things of this movie is the Breck Basinger, who plays young Iris, and I don't know her name offhand, but the actress who plays old Iris, like, that was some great casting in the sense of like, there's that moment in A League of Their Own where you think Gina Davis is in the old makeup and it's actually not her, and I'm like,
yeah, it's like the right kind of uncanny valley where you actually believe it. That's Gabriel Rose, who plays the older version of that character.
Great casting, because that's
I agree.
Chef's kiss. When I left this movie, I had a few thoughts, and my initial thought was this really worth breaking the 14-year dry spell? And I don't know if it was.
Okay.
I enjoyed it. I liked it, but I didn't love it, mainly because the CGI really did take me out. It's almost like how in 4, and like I said, even in 5, where these movies were shot during the 3D heyday, where you can clearly tell where the 3D shots would be. And I'm talking like the stuff that goes through Iris's mouth. I'm talking the whole MRI scene. I'm like all of that. Like, you could very much tell. And for me as a film lover, as someone who, like you, we can't just watch a movie because we know too much about what goes into it.
Yeah,
It's like
yeah.
we really sit down and we can enjoy the script or the cinematography in ways that other people just don't catch on to, and that's totally fine.
Yeah.
These movies are meant to entertain you. Was I entertained? Absolutely. But of course, I have my issues. And I genuinely feel that with, again, what we could see 20 years ago, special effects wise, that alone with what we got here just wasn't worth that 14-year break.
Okay.
Again, I liked it. I didn't love it. Well, I don't really think I'll ever revisit this one just because it's like, okay, I've seen it. Doesn't really reinvent the wheel here. And I'm gonna sidebar that for a second. I'll
Okay.
circle back to that. I don't think there's super memorable deaths in this one. Obviously, we're talking this whole movie, so spoilers now, I guess. But I think
Yeah, I guess we can at this point.
yeah.
I guess okay, just I guess to be clear, so for those listening, I guess I'll jump right into it. I'm in lockstep with Joey on this movie. So in
Oh,
case you're wondering, yeah, so there's no shock here. I was actually secretly hoping that I
yeah.
wouldn't be, which might have made for a fun conversation, but hearing what you're saying here, I'm very much in lockstep. So I wanted to get that out of the way because now let's just put the giant spoiler territory tag on this. We're going spoilers for the rest of this conversation.
I think the best death in the movie isn't Eric the MRI. I think he's the best character, but I think the best death in the movie is his sister who gets crushed in the garbage truck because it's just so horrifying and something that we've all thought of before in real life. But I wouldn't say there's any super memorable deaths in this. I will say a death that I thought was a lot of fun was that little shithead kid. My entire theater erupted in applause, and I specifically remember, excuse my French, but them kids, and my whole theater laughed, and I was like, cool, it landed. But I think I'm also not a fan of the fake outs. There's too many fake outs to the point where I found myself like going, just like get on with it, right?
Like you're starting to sense the puppeteering and the overly calculated movements going on.
Yes, and I do have small issues like the MRI scene. There's metal in an EpiPen, so how was he able to get that EpiPen out of the dude's hand? I'm like, wait a minute, did no one do their research here? I did like, though, how there are shots in the trailer that were clear fake outs. Like the mom, who, by the way, did you know that was Alice from Home Alone 3?
Yeah, I knew that.
Yeah. I was like, why do I know her? I was like, it's Alice.
I did not expect us to bring up Home Alone 3 in this conversation, so I'm just going to throw out a hot take for the sake of hot takes. That's my favorite Home Alone movie.
Me too.
Oh, we are in good company, my friend.
Everyone just closed their...
We just lost every listener.
We lost everybody. There's a shot in the trailer where she's like getting strangled by the spinning doors of the hospital. Like I like a good fake out like that.
Yeah.
Because her death scene doesn't come for like another 20 minutes or so. But
and
even
it's
like
honestly much lamer.
Right. And that damn Penny, dude. Oh my God. Yeah, I got issues with this movie. I think it's fine. It's not great. I'm baffled by the Rotten Tomato score, but that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah. I have thoughts about that too. But like I said, I am very much in lockstep with you on this movie. I did think it was fun overall. Maybe it is one of the better scripted films in this franchise. I do think the familial dynamics at play between the cast are actually quite strong. I could see a whole movie between Bobby and Eric, those two brothers. I think they are quite great, probably the standouts for me personally. And I like all of those things. And there is... I think there at least is a bit of a clever twist on the concept here, at least in the way that the movie flows, because it basically treats The Premonition as more of an extended short film to open things up, which I thought was a pretty clever way to maneuver this story when compared to some of the other ones. So I think that there are great things going on paper, but I am left wondering why Bloodlines is the one that finally has won critics over. It kind of feels a little bit like when the Academy would award a legacy Oscar to someone who deserved it long ago for, almost like serving as a retroactive reevaluation of something that was already great or even much greater to begin with. Maybe the film critic body has just changed, and that's arguably probably what did happen. And they're willing to acknowledge that this franchise has always been kind of nihilistic and interesting. And this new movie is maybe a reflection of that. But for my money, I think this is kind of a mid-tier Final Destination film. It sounds like we gravitate towards similar things here, but the bigger that these movies go, the more that they lose me. And I much prefer when they stick to more of their, I guess, their horror roots, when the deaths feel a bit more practical, a bit smaller, a bit more tangible. But yeah, the visual effects here, the grandness of the death sequences here, really did not work for me. It's too clean, it's too digitized, it's missing that shock and that grossness of the first three films. The garbage truck death is probably the closest it came to recapturing what I actually like about this franchise. But it's maybe the only one that felt like there was some practical effects work to back it up. But the more money that was thrown at this one, the cheaper it kind of looked, if I'm being honest. And I think comparing it to the almost 3D digitization of the fourth film, and even to an extent the fifth one, there is a little bit of that here. And I found that unfortunate. And that's just for those listening, if we've alienated enough people already, Joey and I like very particular things from this franchise. And the bigness that this one is going for, not quite for us, apparently.
Yeah, here's the thing. So I've had this idea. Okay, I've been very lucky. I have pitched existing IP horror sequels. That's like something I'm very lucky to be able to do now. And one of the ones I've worked on recently was the next Halloween film. And so to give you an idea of where I'm going here with Final Destination, what I want to see in a sequel as a fan is of any horror franchise is something that we haven't seen before, but honors its roots, right? So like going into Halloween for me, and I obviously can't say anything about that right now, but with that, like I honored it, but also as a fan, right? So if I were to look at Final Destination, I've had this idea since I was probably in 8th grade after I saw part 3. And it's something like, if you're going to spend money, don't do it on the big disaster in the sense of how you said we get these weird, like cheapened effects, right?
Yeah.
Do it on a setting. I want to see a Final Destination take place during like the Spanish Inquisition with all the medieval torture devices and everything.
Oh my gosh, that'd be so cool.
Right. Like something
basically Army of Darkness, this stuff or something like that.
Literally. I want to see something where, and that's the thing. I will give 6 its props. Each movie, except for that fourth one, gave us something really new for the franchise, right?
Yeah.
So the first one, it set it up. Brand new, obviously.
Yeah.
Part 2, it gave us the return of a character and then did the death in the backwards order. Part 3 gave us the death coming in photos. Part 4 is just there. 5 gave us the twist of connecting it all together.
Yeah.
6 gave us, the generational thing. Well, I want to see a Final Destination movie where you don't know who dies next because the person who has the premonition maybe dies randomly second or third. And then no one's safe. You really don't know who's next.
Yeah.
We haven't seen it before.
Which is, I think that's a great idea because this franchise has been very vocal about how death really changes his rules with every movie anyway.
Right.
So
Right.
like they always say death has a plan, when in actuality his plan is that he always screws with the plan.
Right.
And every movie kind of does that. I do like the familial dynamic here. I think it is a nice change of pace here, and there is maybe this allusion to the fact that every Final Destination movie beforehand is somehow linked to the events of Bloodlines, as if that opening disaster was maybe somehow linked to every disaster in this entire franchise. It doesn't directly say that, but I think there are little hints to suggest that, I don't know, maybe every main character in this franchise had an ancestor in that Skyview Tower or something, which could be a clever thing, but I will say this. Your idea of going into like the Spanish Inquisition or something like that, that would be wild. That would be absolutely wild.
Like Craig Perry, I can easily our entertainment lawyers are very close. Like Craig Perry, part 7, we know it's going to happen. Let me pitch it. But I want to instantly, I love the enthusiasm and the idea of how this one connects all of them. But there's one big issue that would instantly shut that down.
Sure.
Every character from those films, their parents are still alive.
That's a good point. That's a great point.
Yeah. So this one doesn't connect in that way. And I hate to be the bearer or the Debbie Downer here, but I'm like, I love that idea, but like Alex's parents in the first one would have died before Alex even got to the airport.
That's a fair point. Yeah, that's a good point.
So unfortunately, no, but I do want to ask you, because I don't know if you follow the lore or just like whatever, but for years, the fans were like, oh, Wendy's alive. Wendy's alive from part 3. And I'm like, is she? But they confirmed that the only survivor from any of the movies is Kimberly, aka AJ Cook from part 2.
From part 2.
What are your thoughts on that one?
I kind of thought that was honestly obvious just based on the other movies.
Right.
Okay, so I'm glad we're in lockstep here as well. I felt like it was pretty clear that Wendy did die at the end of Final Destination 3. And the only character that seemed to still be lingering in some way, or at least maybe had some unresolved ending, was Kimberly. And that's only because in the beginning, or at least in the midpoint of Final Destination 2, it also confirms that Devon Sawa's character from the first film also ended up dying later. So it kind of plays with the suspense a little bit, but then gives us an answer in that regard. Kimberly was always left dangling. So it's no surprise that this movie then references her as the one to have successfully cheated death. So yeah, that didn't surprise me. That felt kind of obvious to me.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously they, when Ali Larter was the biggest name at that time, when by the time 2 came out, especially, they kill her off, and that was a huge shock. Here's the thing. I love a movie franchise, especially a horror one, that'll bring back, like, let's say a final girl. But like something like Scream, it's like, girl, Sydney, move to the Aleutian Islands in Alaska. Like, get out of Dodge. It's like some characters need to have their piece. So would you want to see Kimberly back in another one where she re-enters it? If she's technically already beaten it, does she get to have her happy ending, or does she come back for you?
I think I'm good. I don't think I need to see her again. Yeah. I to be perfectly honest, the fact that her character is still dangling unresolved, I think actually adds a level of fascination to this entire conceit. I'm okay just leaving that go. If this franchise is going to continue, I would rather it be continuing the kind of the gimmick of new characters in whatever way. But to your point, maybe change the setting and get a little more creative in that regard. I don't need to see someone come back. And like Kimberly, for instance, I don't need to see her come back.
Yeah. Another issue I had with this movie, and I actually just thought of it now as you were talking, because we were talking about returning characters, and obviously Tony Todd, which I find myself tearing up in that scene. I genuinely, I was like,
I was going to ask you what you thought about Tony Todd here.
Yeah. Well, okay. So I'll answer that. He was the best part of the movie. I mean, he was in 1, 2, and 5. Obviously, his voice was in part 3 as the devil on the roller coaster. But he had been missing from 3 and 4 essentially. And I thought, which is also funny because that recent tweet where that guy had called out the Cannes viewers about everything needing an Oscar, but I was like, I was like, I'm not saying that I'm that person that watches a movie and is like, Oscar, but like, this is the type of thing as a movie fan, as a fan of the Academy, as a fan of horror, where if you really watch that movie, like, and they had, campaign supporting actor, I would not be mad at that, because that is such a touching moment. And to know that was improvised and that had such the emotional impact it did, I'm like, that's why a supporting actor category exists for something like that.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. And it's why genre bias when it comes to the Academy is so unfortunate, if I'm being honest, because then it misses the boat on situations like this. What Tony Todd is doing, and the fact that his final monologue was essentially improvised, it does something that I love to see. And when I say love to see, I'm trying to be careful with how I say that, because I've never experienced death myself. I don't know what that's like. I've never suffered what Tony Todd had to suffer. I can't relate to that. But I do think there is something very brave about artists really turning their upcoming death into a form of their art. And they kind of make it a meta thing. And I feel like that's what he's doing. He's getting very self-reflective about his upcoming death. It's almost like he knows it's coming, and that fuels his performance, and that fuels that monologue. It's almost like, not even almost, it's actually very much like how when David Bowie passed in 2016. His final album, Black Star, was
Oh,
all
yeah.
about his death. And
Yeah.
then he died, I think, only a few days after that album was released. And he made an entire artistic statement about that, about confronting that. That's kind of what Tony Todd is doing here. And I do think that's beautiful.
Yeah, I was to go then into what I was earlier saying with something I was disappointed with, the twist of that being little Tony Todd. I literally was with my friend Gab, and I looked over at her the moment I saw him, and I'm like, "That's him. That's Tony Todd's character." And the fact that for me, again, like we watch things differently. We know how things get put in. I'm like, I hate when I can call a twist so early on, especially that early in a movie. And the fact that it's in the first 10 minutes, and then I'm like, ugh. I think it was beautiful. It also, though, that annoys me, but I think it was beautiful that he went out this way, and I'm very happy we don't see his character's death.
Yeah, I'm with
I
you.
was worried that was going to happen.
Yeah, I'm very much with you.
Yeah.
I will admit I didn't necessarily see that twist coming, but I could see how someone could call it, because there is an emphasis on that young boy at the beginning in a way that almost feels kind of jarring. Like it veers into a different narrative for just a moment, as if to suggest, okay, this is going to be important in some way later. And I don't necessarily mind that they gave him a bit of a backstory that helps define who he is and why he is. But yeah, it could have been a little bit more, I guess, cryptic in the way that it treated it. I don't necessarily disagree. But the send off for him here, and the fact that it ends with him just walking out these two double doors, and that's it. There's something very bittersweet about that. It's almost like his ghost somehow still lingers throughout the rest of the movie, and that's a very effective thing for a movie to pull off.
Yeah. He will be greatly missed for sure. There's something about, it's the people you grew up with. It's the people who will forever be on, that print of film. Like we will always have that time that they gave to us to enjoy. But I think the sadness about it is knowing that we won't get anything new.
Yeah.
And that's selfish in a way. And I recognize that as a person. But I think it's in the best way possible to be selfish, because we have so much love for those artists. And it's like,
well, and as you said, we grew up with them, so it's almost like we kind of know them in a way, without saying we actually know them. But I think that's the beauty of this job that they're in, and that's how we as film lovers interact with these movies. That's why we love doing what we do, because we find that connection, we find friendships, unofficial friendships with these movies. But that sequence with Tony Todd is really quite beautiful. And I love that for a moment, it turns the movie into kind of a thematic exercise. They go to him for information about how to get around Death's plan, and he doesn't really give them much of a plan. Instead, it's more of a moment of self-reflection, and it becomes kind of a pit stop for them to think about something else. I've seen a lot of people joke about how this movie is actually a better depiction of generational trauma than most other contemporary horror movies nowadays. I don't know if I necessarily buy that, but I do at least kind of recognize that it is here a bit. And maybe that sequence with Tony Todd is able to, I guess, heighten some of those thematic ideas to make them a bit more noticeable. I will say, I think, comparatively to, let's say, something like, I don't know, Hereditary, for instance, the Ari Aster film, which is very much about that thing. It is kind of refreshing to see a movie like this take those same heavy themes, but have a little bit of fun with it. I think that's at least a refreshing thing. But I do think Tony Todd, just in his brief moment, he adds a subtext to this movie, and it's a moment that is very artful and well earned because of it.
Yeah, he's definitely, for me, the highlight of this movie. The brief scene that we get with him. But it's weird. It's like it's the brief scene, but it doesn't feel brief. Like it feels like it takes like 10 minutes of the time. But that's just because, again, he's coming in this movie at some point. We knew going into this, it's his last one, obviously. So it's like it was something to look forward to. So it was, for me, like I soaked in every second that he was there. Beautiful send off. Beautiful send off.
I feel like we can write dissertations on Tony Todd's appearance in this movie. Was there anyone else in the cast that stood out to you? I know you mentioned Eric, played by Richard Harmon, as maybe one of your favorite characters here, but I assume because I think of the new cast, I do think he gives the best performance here.
I will actually, yes, but I'm going to put new cast into two categories because
Okay.
I also think Brett Bessinger was really good as Iris. I think she is
Mhm.
fantastic, and I wish we would have gotten more than just what we did with her.
Mhm.
If I really have to rank them, I think I would put Eric ahead there.
Okay.
But yes, I will agree with that statement actually, wholeheartedly. But yeah, I think Breck and Eric are the two standouts of this cast. I don't like a horror movie that wastes characters,
Mhm.
like Aunt Brenda and the dad character of uh uh
Oh, Marty, played by
Stephanie.
Timpo Lee. Yeah.
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 I can't stand it was like that movie Hard Eyes that came out this year. It was like there were all these characters that were like
Oh,
totally set
yeah.
up as like should have been victims. And I'm like, kill them. I can't I just for me it's lazy writing. I'm just like imagine something with I mean if Eric's not supposed to die, like his character's not supposed to die, I'm like, then you could have easily killed off Brenda and Marty
You
at some point.
there was more room to get a bit more rule breaky with that stuff
Yes.
if you were going to do the same thing with Eric.
Yes.
And I think it's less so that they don't die in this movie. It's more so that they're kind of integral within the narrative at one point, and then the movie just forgets that they exist.
Yep.
And there's no relishing in, well, I guess, for lack of a better term, the trauma of what these characters are going through. What are they thinking during all of this? It basically turns their characters into glorified cameos in the whole situation, and it's very imbalanced. I think it's just very imbalanced writing.
And literally, Brenda loses her husband and three kids in a matter of like 48 hours. Like, you
Mhm.
know that she is
She's suffering. She's not
losing.
happy.
No. Do you know what's wild in this movie, though? The way that old Iris lives at like Fort Knox. Like, first of all, it was such a Laurie Strode a la Halloween 2018 thing to do with her. And it's like, okay,
Uh-huh.
she lives recluse, blah, blah, blah. But
Yeah.
like literally death wants to kill you and you live in the unsafest possible thing ever. At least in part two,
Yeah.
Clear Rivers, that character was in an insane asylum
Yeah.
voluntarily in a padded room.
In a padded room where there was nothing else
Right.
but pillows around her, essentially.
She's like, yeah, here's the here's the TNT, here are the spikes, here's all. I'm like, what?
Yeah,
Ugh.
it's downright silly. I
Yeah.
did laugh at it, and I was left wondering if that was intentional, if it was meant to be funny, like meant to be sort of like a sense of irony or something like that.
Yeah.
Because if it was, then I guess I'll give the movie a little bit of credit for playing into that silliness a little bit and being very self-aware with that. These movies, I think, are at their best when they are funny, and
Mhm.
there are a lot of things in Final Destination Bloodlines that did make me laugh. Like I said, the whole dynamic between Eric and Bobby, especially in the hospital. I mean, say what you will about the MRI sequence. I think maybe the
Mhm.
staging of it is better than the actual effects themselves. But the interplay between them, the way they talk to each other, is really fun. And there are a lot of moments like that throughout the movie, which is why I think it's kind of unfortunate that I don't think this is among the best in the franchise. I think there are pieces here from a writing standpoint, from a character banter standpoint, that are among the best of the franchise.
Yeah.
But we, especially you and I, we gravitate towards other things here. And you want to talk about the death sequences in this franchise. You want to remember those. And I really didn't remember much of them at all. And they really fall flat for me.
Yeah, a big thing that was missing with the writing for me and the way they did this in different, almost at time zones, but time frames in general.
Mhm.
One of the best parts about Final Destination is like when you're meeting the characters who die in the premonition, that character essentially gets 2 or 3 deaths in a film. So like
Yeah.
everyone, yeah, we see all these people die, but none of it really matters because we don't end up following any of them. So it's
Mhm.
like, the one lady who gets crushed with the piano, like I would have loved to, learn her story. Like, so it feels like
Mhm.
there's no real risk in losing the characters that we do get to meet because like they're just
Well,
bystanders.
and that's a good point because this is a movie that's trying to treat that premonition, like I said earlier, like an extended short film of sorts.
Mhm.
So maybe we should have spent more time with some of these other characters. So when they do die in the premonition, there actually is kind of an an emotional effect that it leaves on us, even if it is very brief and very fleeting. But we really only spend time with Iris and her boyfriend, and
Right.
maybe one exchange with one of the singers of this band in this Skyview Tower. But
Yeah.
aside from that, it's very minimal. It's very limited, and there is maybe more room to play with that, especially if the movie is giving additional time to lengthen that sequence. I kind of wish that maybe you're right, that it was a bit more interactive in that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another missed opportunity. This movie's full of missed opportunities, I feel
Yeah,
like.
and that's the thing. That's like that's what really floors me about how well the critics are loving this one. For me, if
Mhm.
I'm ranking them, I would put this one right in the middle, honestly.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask you as we round out this conversation and close things out,
Oh,
how you
sorry.
No,
I
no,
didn't mean
you're
to
good,
jump.
you're good. I'm glad you're this is sometimes I think I tend to communicate with people who have the same brain as me. I feel like
Okay.
I'm able to steer the conversation into places that just naturally are meant to go where they need to go. But yeah, I did wanna ask you how you feel like this would rank of the 6 movies, and it sounds like maybe somewhere in the middle then.
Yeah, I mean, my ranking if I'm going worst to best, it would be the worst one is 4.
Mhm,
Then I just put 1 not because it's bad, just it's so plain.
mhm,
No pun intended. It's so plain compared to what follows it. I'm like, thank you for the setup, but cool. Then I
mhm.
would put this one. Then I would put 2, 5, and 3 at number 1.
Okay, okay. I think 3 is also my favorite, and then the
Mhm.
4th one's also my least favorite. I feel like everyone would universally agree that the 4th is the worst.
Yes.
So and it doesn't
Yeah.
really count. Um, I have to rewatch 5 again. Maybe our biggest disparity is I don't like 5 as much as you do. I think if anything, it's maybe more so the ending that really defines that movie in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Getting to that point, I don't necessarily love the characters as much in that one, even though I do think there is sort of a return to form when compared to 2 and 3 and how mean and funny and nihilistic it is. It's definitely
Mhm.
flirting with that energy once again.
Yeah.
But still, for me, the first 3 are my 3 favorites, and maybe the order being 3, 1, and 2 from top to 3rd place. Bloodlines would be probably in that 4th place slot for me. So I'm with you right in the middle.
Yeah, I mean, just I don't know how you are doing this year thus far with film, but I'm having a very rough year finding anything I like. Like my favorite movie of the
Okay.
year thus so far is Novocaine, and like
I haven't
my
seen it yet,
most
admittedly.
what's up?
I haven't seen it yet, admittedly.
Oh, it's so much fun. It's so much fun. And like my most hated movie of the year so far is Sinners. Like I just like
Wow.
yeah,
Hot
I
takes a brew, and I love it.
listen, I know I'm in the minority here on this one. I fully admit it, but there are so many things wrong with Sinners that no one just wants to talk about. I
Mhm.
mean, they're glaringly in your face, and everyone just wants to look over it, and it just drives me insane. But I just like I love that people who love it can appreciate it, whether it's Sinners or this or anything.
Mhm.
I just wish I was there with them. Uh,
Yeah, I wish
yeah,
I can share their enthusiasm, but I will say I'm glad a movie like this, especially in this franchise, seems to be doing well.
yeah,
I like that idea, and I don't think it's a terrible movie by any means, so it could be a lot worse, right?
yeah. We're
So
getting
yeah,
a seventh one after the box office returns for sure.
well, I think it sets a good precedent for how to do movies like this going forward, that movies don't need to cost $400 million in order to be big hits.
Yep.
This had a budget, I think, around 50 million,
Mhm.
if I'm not mistaken. And I think just the domestic numbers alone made around 100 million
Yeah.
already, just in its opening weekend. That's quite impressive. So,
Mhm.
if anything, I think it's going to set a good precedent for how mid-budget movies are going to be more important going forward, and we need those.
So that yes, and it really is just proof in the pudding again with how well horror does, especially existing IPs in horror. We all get sick of them eventually, but when you come back to
Yeah,
them, I mean, look at what happened to Saw 10. Nobody thought the 10th installment in the Saw movies was going to be that good or make that much money.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
again, this has been dormant for 14 years. Uh, there are kids who had literally only heard about this movie because of TikTok now.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
and I mean, it's insane. But I want to ask you, I mean, I gave a great example with, and I know it was great. I'm not gonna lie, medieval great. But if you were to pitch the seventh, do you have an idea about what that disaster would be?
Oh, no, I never thought about that, if I'm being honest. I like to be surprised. I don't like to
Mhm.
make my own expectations on something because then I don't want to be disappointed if it's not the movie I wanted. I tend to
Mhm.
try to avoid that, but honestly, I want to see your movie. I want to see your pitch now that
Thanks.
you talked about it. I don't mean to toot your own horn, but
No, no,
I
no, toot
really
it, toot
do.
it, it's okay.
Yeah.
Um,
I will say maybe something I would like to see this franchise do. It doesn't necessarily need to be the disaster itself, but maybe do something that forces our main cast to be trapped in a single location or something like that.
Ooh.
So maybe it could be almost like a Titanic like situation where death is about to come because the boat is sinking and they have to figure out how to navigate that and whether they know if death is going to actually orchestrate it for them or not. Maybe make it more of a like elongated plan as opposed to a sudden plan. I think basically it's my way of saying I like when this franchise feels a bit more contained and doesn't go as big as some of the later installments have been.
Well, I know, like, and this was asked of me, so I'm just gonna throw it for you with this idea of the medieval thing. I
Okay.
had someone ask, like, "Well, what would the disaster be during that time?" I said, "Yeah, well, let's take the Spanish Inquisition because that was huge for torture devices, right?"
Mhm.
A big thing you always found in castles was the floor caving in. So
Yeah.
imagine you have like the royals and the servants and the people who are, live in the village and the castle is about to go down, right? Like that, there's your
Mhm.
disaster. It doesn't have to be, a bridge collapse. If we're taking in a modern day, I would love maybe like a dam breaking into and flooding out a town. I mean, there's plenty of those towns like that in Nevada. Like you
Mhm.
would have the whole dam break. Maybe something like Astro World when there was like a music festival issue, and it was just, there's so much you could do still.
Yeah.
Um,
How about
but
how about if they just turn this upcoming sequel to Twisters into a Final Destination movie? Just Twisted Destination or something like that.
yeah. And I mean, even did you watch that slash movie Thanksgiving for Eli Roth a couple years ago?
No, I didn't. I missed that one, unfortunately.
So that one it starts off like a Final Destination movie because it's like Black Christmas shopping or Black Friday shopping, and
Mhm.
people just get yoked in this store from other people. I mean, there's so many things you could still do with that.
Sure.
Um, the options are endless.
Yeah. I just hope that this if this franchise were to keep going,
Mm,
bring things a bit more small scale once again. That's really what
yeah.
I ask for. So if anything, it's less so a pitch on the disaster or even the idea of the movie.
Mhm.
I would more so pitch an executional uh, plan, if that makes sense. I
Yeah.
want to see it be more tangible, even less expensive. It doesn't need to be $50 million from a cost standpoint. You can bring it back to basics. Now that you have a hit on your hands, people will go to see the next one. Make it on the cheap. Make it a bit more tangible. Make it more like the second and third movie. If you still have to go a little bit bigger with it, but
Mhm.
I want to see it return more to its horror roots,
Mhm.
and I hope that's what they do next. But given the success of this one, I feel like it might go in the same direction as Bloodlines. At least I fear it might. But I'm
Yeah.
glad it's doing well. I'm glad it's doing well. I'll simply say that. As we round out this conversation, Joey, do you have any last thoughts on Final Destination here?
I think the film is fine. It's right in the middle for me. I love that people who love it. And if you don't, come sit next to me and let's talk let's talk smack about it. But
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, listen, again, I think it's got one really, really solid death in it. Again, garbage truck. It's got
Mhm.
two pretty cool characters in it. Iris and Eric, right? That's the
Eric,
name.
yeah, played by
Yeah.
Richard Harmon. Yeah.
And of course, rest in peace, Tony Todd. But it's an underwhelming sequel. I don't really know if we needed it after all this time.
Yeah, I don't think it quite justifies the 14-year wait and the extravagant praise it seems to be getting. I think it's more reflective of the reevaluation of the franchise itself than it is a reflection of this particular movie. At least that's how I feel. But for those of you listening, I'm sure you might disagree with what Joey and I just had to say about it. You can leave a comment below if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, you can leave us a comment there as well. You can also hit us up on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, all at In Session Film. Or you can email us your thoughts at insessionfilm@gmail.com. Joey, thanks again for being here. Really do appreciate it, man.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, real quickly before we get out of here, tell the listeners about the great work that you do and where we can find you online.
Yeah. So, excuse me. As mentioned earlier, I have a very rare exclusive coming with the youngest person ever nominated for an Acting Academy Award, Justin Henry. He was nominated for Supporting Actor in 1979 for Kramer versus Kramer. He sat down with me. We have a mutual friend who connected us.
Oh, great.
And he gave me everything from what it's like to be the youngest to where he's at now to what he thinks of the Academy and the direction it's going. Really nice guy. I'm really excited for people to read that. And so that'll be available on insessionfilm.com. And then, I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Joey Gentile 1992. And if you really need to follow me on Blue Sky, which I'm never on, or Twitter that I'm never on really anymore either, I'm there as well. So
not to throw shade your way. You don't even follow me back on Blue Sky. That's how active you are on it.
I am not active on Blue Sky at all. But now, you know what? Hold on. Now I'm going specifically.
Didn't mean to call you out. I mean, because we know this in our day and age, being followed by someone means you're actually friends with someone, right? That's just how we have to define it.
Very true. That is very true.
By the way, I urge everyone listening to go and check out Joey's work. If anything, you will get a passionate story out of it, and you will have a great time. So, Joey, thanks again for being here. Really do appreciate it. That'll do it for this week's show. For those of you listening, just a few plugs here to get out of the way. On episode 637, JD and I talked about our top 5 movie characters that we would like to see get the Andor spinoff treatment. It was a rather difficult topic, but one that got us feeling very inspired, very passionate, and allowed us to veer outside our comfort zone a little bit, which was a lot of fun. We also have a full review of the French romantic comedy, Jane Austen Wrecked My Life, that is either available now or it should be coming out sometime this week, so be on the lookout for that. Really do appreciate you being here once again, Joey, and thanks to everyone for listening. We will see you all next time on the In Session Film Podcast.